Mode started, we actually started the first pilots and tests we ran were on the Azure backbone network. And we spun up nodes, and we had a relationship with Microsoft that's still there today where we were working with them. And we realized in that framework, as we started looking at global applications, or at least applications that were multi-regional, that the problems we were solving, the way our solution works, the more of the nodes we could get access to and the more choices we had in the network, the more performant we could be, as I mentioned earlier. And so when we looked at Ericsson's network, what we liked was there was a big depth of network coverage. There were a lot of POPs around the world. We were getting very close to the edges of the network. And it also gave us a lot of decision points. So in traditional networks, the more nodes you have, the more routes you have, the more complicated it becomes, kind of the less you can do. You have to sort of fix stuff and become more rigid. It's the exact opposite with our network. And so Edge Gravity gave us a very flexible platform to run on. And the other piece of Edge Gravity that was important was the deeper service provider relationships. Because if you look at the core 22 POPs, that's where we are today. But many of the service providers are launching POPs deeper into their networks, right, to get closer. And we're actually doing that. We're spinning up POPs in China right now. We've got a bunch in Southeast Asia with another service provider. And so for us, that was almost as important, that deeper edge, as the core backbone that we're running on today. And we think that's going to give us a huge advantage in terms of cost performance and benefit to enterprise as we go forward.
Awesome. So Ericsson. Now, when I think of Ericsson, I think about 5G. I think about radios.
Sweet.
Whose idea was this? Like, what was the actual genesis of all of this? Like, why did Ericsson find this so intriguing of a project to take on? I mean, this seems like a bit of a different motion for Ericsson.
Okay, that's a good question. Let's see. So, do you guys remember the operator CDN market?
Yep.
Right. Okay. So, when I have quite a lot of experience of that market, so we created an operator CDN at Ericsson. We had some great ideas, and we thought. The operators wanted to get into the content industry. They were thought about, well, we can do transparent internet caching and deal with over-the-top traffic that way. We can monetize and make ourselves into CDNs that will be able to make revenue, and we also have an IPTV play. So we will, we'll do that, and we'll create a solution that will do that. And the technology was sound. The performance was far better than anything you can get from a best effort or global CDN that has to deal with the challenges of the internet. The problem was scale and relevance to the content industry. So if you were a big telco, a big operator that decided to implement a CDN, you had a fair crack at being relevant and having a content business, right? A CDN business. But many of them couldn't. And so as we went forward, that started to trigger some ideas, and we thought, well, what if we kind of did something where we actually gave them global scale? And what if it wasn't just a CDN? What if it was cloud? 5G's coming, it's got distributed cloud infrastructure, the networks are going to become virtualized. These are really valuable, premium cloud resources that could be exposed to on a global footprint, on a global edge. And you think, well, but they're only on their own now. So we've learned that lesson through the operator CDN business. So let's not make the same mistake again. Let's work with the operators, bring them together, and aggregate them on a global stage. So that's what's triggered the idea, and we proved it with a new version of the CDN, which was bringing them all together.
So the app is the network, basically. So that's cool. So I'll pause again. Any questions from anybody? Hey, there we go. Yes, sir.
When 5G is fully implemented, how do you see the storage and compute requirements change from what they are today?
Okay, that's a great question. How long do we have for that answer? Okay, so when 5G comes along, can I answer this in a roundabout way, if I may? So when we talk about putting making a service provider into an edge, it's not just that we peer with them to our Equinix partners in their data centers. We actually have a well-defined bill of materials that we work with the operators for, and they purchase it from wherever they want, at no profit to anybody other than the people they purchase it from, so not from us. And that enables us to then put our platform on top of it across our Equinix data center partners, and then our points of presence within the operator networks, and we can then deploy and provide then access to our partners like Mode to be able to run their solutions. Now, when 5G becomes available, you're talking, it's not just the spectrum, it's not just the radio, there's a whole architecture behind that, as I'm sure you appreciate from your question. And it's an ETSI-NFV architecture, and with that, there is opportunity for an operator to do exactly the same in principle. So they can over-provision their cloud, their distributed cloud infrastructure, so that the same applications that we currently put onto our platform can be actually passed or pushed as workloads to the 5G environment. And now you're getting into more hypothetical. So you're talking about service chains, network slicing, the conversion from a virtual machine container or a function as a service translated into a VNF that then gets deployed deep within the radio network. So from a business perspective, it doesn't change. From an engineering perspective, the deployment of workloads changes a bit. But the great thing is, once the 5G comes along, we can start to use more policy control and enforcement functions. We can actually apply QoS. So when Paul's solution spins up a global solution, we can actually also provision an interaction directly with the network as well and get that true QoS. So really right from all the endpoints and really include the service providers in the value chain.
Any other questions in the audience? Come on, somebody must have a question. You all look so... Oh, here, I see an arm over there. Is that true? Is that what you're doing, or you're just scratching your head?
Hi. I would like to go home with some notes from the conference, because maybe the language is a bit technical, but I would still like to have a value from what you gentlemen discussed. So if you would be able to summarize in a few words on a more general understanding, but still technical, passionate, what would that be, some notes that we can take home from the discussion?
Is the question on what's the total addressable market of the edge?
Wow, that's an interesting way of trying to see. So, it's funny, and at Equinix, I'll start maybe with my end of things. And tell you just the way we think about it, because it's a good question, the economics of how all of this is evolving. In our world, in technical real estate, if you will, if you imagine most of the last 40, 50 years of technology, most of it sat where? It was in your basement, really. I mean, or an IT cabinet, and then eventually that evolved into some sort of internal data center. And actually, to this day, most IT workloads, that's where they sit. And so when you think about that, what does that take up? It takes up millions, if not billions of square feet of space. However, in almost all cases, and this is the first thing any enterprise or service provider tells us, no one ever gets it right. They either build too much or they build too little, and that's a problem. And so the whole reason the multi-tenant data center business even exists is because it's a more efficient way of allocating things. You can buy all the way down to the rack, right? Or even a half rack or a quarter rack, right? So you can get very, very granular in terms of what you consume from us. So if you just thought about the value of the real estate, right, that's going into making the internet and the networks function, that's been sort of rationalizing itself over time. So we can do it sort of cheaper and more efficiently, granular from an economic perspective, and that allows the industry to continue to grow. If everybody sat in their own building, right, there was no edge, so to speak, you wouldn't necessarily get the kind of value creation. But if you were just to value that, hundreds of millions, if, like I said, not billions of square feet, I mean, you're literally talking about, trillions of dollars of value. Another way that we tend to look at things is just what's happening in terms of the concentration of IT because of what's happening with cloud. So cloud has created this giant sucking sound toward hyperscale data centers where all these IT workloads are going to go live. And that's creating a massive amount of the virtualization of even the real estate business. Now, sometimes people look at us and go, do you think that's good for you? And our argument is actually, it is. And I'll tell you why. And again, this gets down to economics and performance. Economically speaking, and we've seen this with all of our enterprise deployments. So you saw we had almost 3,000 enterprise customers. Nobody at that level, 100% goes to cloud, right? And that's because of two things. Almost everything in an IT department, because it can't be moved completely to cloud, is hybrid. So there's some legacy bare metal component that needs to sit somewhere. Well, if I want to shut down my data center and I still have something like a mainframe or a microservices layer, where do I put that? Well, probably it would be a good idea to stick it right next to Amazon's gateway, which happens to sit in our building. So that's nice for us. So that, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of what's out there from an IT workload could condense, right, and go into the cloud, and 20% of it could stay off. If only 20% didn't go to the cloud, we're a $5 billion company today. We would be an order of magnitude larger as a company, just to give you, some perspective. So maybe that's, two kind of ways to think about the value, at least at the sort of technical real estate level. I don't know if you might have a perspective on the compute side of things.
Well, I was just taking a deep breath in to try to answer this, because being edge gravity part of Ericsson, we're not measured in that way at this point. But the question does come up a lot. And the way I think about it, and I know others do as well, is there's different ways that the applications that are using our infrastructure are going to evolve. So a good example is the Limelight partner we have. So that's an established business. The CDN is a very well-known business. I don't have the numbers, so it's not that well-known in my head, I'm afraid. But so Limelight are using our infrastructure, our service provider, edge partners to deliver their traffic. So you could start to think about, well, okay, what percentage of that edge? And once we know, over some time, once it's all fully rolled out and it's working as we'd all like, we will be able to probably have a value of what part of the CDN business, in the context of Limelight, has transferred to the edge. Does that make sense? So, and if you take that same rationale towards cloud computing, as you said, Jim, there are workloads quite happily running off in the cloud today. And as I said in my presentation, we're not looking to forklift a monolithic application or somebody that's super happy sitting in Amazon or Azure or Google. We're not looking to do that. But when you talk to the guys who have deployed their application in there, they think, well, actually, if I really could, there are a few workloads, there are some components that would make a lot more sense for performance-wise deeper. So what that deeper towards where my endpoint is. So that is taking something away from the public cloud and putting it at the edge. So that's another way we start to partition it. But we don't know yet how much of that or what that's going to be. And then from the device side, you have all these new cool drones and AR, and you can see a dancing drone on our stand if you go and have a look at it. I don't know why it's dancing, actually. I should have a closer look. But there's all kinds of cool end device applications that are pushing and offloading their capabilities, their requirements into the edge. So, and I don't know how to quantify that market either yet. So we're ultimately creating a new market vertical. And I think over the next couple of years, we'll see some interesting ways of triangulating how it's going to grow and how it's going to size. And hopefully, it's going to be a lot of value that we can share in our ecosystem with all our partners and our service providers, our technology providers, and strategic partners like Equinix.
Want to take a crack at it?
Sure. Well, I'll give a slightly different perspective. I mean, I think about applications. I think about the cloud and the edge. So from a network perspective as well, right? The simplest way I think about it is that low latency stuff should be as close to people as possible. And you look at an iPhone, right? Everybody has local apps running on your iPhone. Yeah, they're going to cloud for what they need to get to, but they're running. Why do you build an app? Why not just put a web browser up there? And that's where everything went. And now it's coming down to local. I think that as you look at the edge, if you can push stuff out to the edge where it needs to be there for latency, meaning the time to respond to it, it's very important and relevant. It's easier to scale stuff in a centralized location. So obviously the mainframe model and pushing stuff up to the cloud and way, way back away, if the latency is not an issue, then that's a great thing to do. I think what we're seeing is that now that we're getting compute pushed more and more out to the edge, now that the networks are better and the connectivity is there, you're going to see as much as possible moving out to the edge to get to that low latency. And I look at applications, I'd say the big cloud guys with large data egress charges, if I'm doing an IoT application where I'm taking terabytes of data, petabytes of data to process, I'm going to try to do that at the edge if I can, and just store the stuff that actually matters, because I need to process it quickly. There's a lot of data. Throw the stuff away I don't need. Put the stuff that's important into the cloud. And I think you're going to see a tiered architecture where I look at it as latency and cost are going to be the two things that drive where it goes in that physical framework.